What's up? This is Dr. Taylor Krick at the Washington Wellness Center, and today we're talking about how to sleep better. I'm going to give you at least 25, maybe more strategies for more restful, sound sleep. So the point of this is that I'm going to throw a lot of things out there. It's not that you need to try all 25 or 30, but you're going to hear some things that you might pick up, and you might pick up 5 of these, or you might pick up 10 of these. But all of these things can help you improve your sleep. And, I speak to this with personal experience that I'm going to talk about my Oura Ring. I'm going to talk about my sleep personally. But when I first got an Oura Ring, I was getting something like 15 minutes of deep sleep a night. Okay, and we're going to talk about the sleep cycles, the sleep stages just briefly, but my point, I'm going to fly through some of that stuff because my point today is to just give you lots and lots of resources. And, this is educational and informational, but it's also going to be used for my patients so I can send them this webinar and say, hey, watch this webinar. You need to do some of these things, and then we're going to talk about it at your next consults. But going back to what I was saying, I was getting about 15 minutes of deep sleep a night. I had no idea. And when I started measuring it, when I started doing some of these things, now my average deep sleep is about an hour a night, and it's usually a lot more than that. So I'm kind of surprised that it's still that low average, but it's averaging out all those 15-minute nights too. But now I'm getting more like an hour to 90 minutes every night, and I'm going to talk about how I measure that. We're going to talk about what that means. We're going to talk about all this. I think that sleep, it probably goes without saying that sleep is really important. We all know what it feels like to not sleep very well. We all know how it feels to be tired. We all know that sleep is important for growth, for repair, for regeneration, for rejuvenation, for metabolism, for detoxification, for memory formation, for cognitive function, for really, really everything. So I think that even more so than your nutrition, I think that sleep is really, really, really important. But those two things together and a couple others are just very, very foundational. So the first thing I want to talk about is just, what are we looking at and what are we talking about when we talk about sleep, and how do we sleep? So when we're asleep, we cycle through stages. And I'm not going to go into tremendous detail of this, but we go through light sleep. Lighter sleep first, so a couple stages of lighter sleep. Then we go into deeper sleep. And all of these stages, when they do an EEG, these are different brain wavelengths. So like deep sleep is delta wave, slow wave sleep, and it's very, very restorative. Your light sleep, not as much. Light sleep, really, out of all of these things, is the least important. Now, they're all important because you got to go through light sleep to get to deep sleep, and you go through these cycles and these stages. So it's not that one is more important than the other, but you need really deep sleep. You need restorative deep sleep. A lot of people are just lacking on their deep sleep. Then when you come out of deep sleep, you go into what's called REM sleep, or rapid eye movement, where your body's truly paralyzed and different things happen in REM, but it's characterized by your eyes moving really rapidly. It's often more of a theta wave sleep, and we've felt that before. We're kind of half asleep, half awake, but we're still fully paralyzed. We're dreaming more, and it's just a different state of brain wavelengths. So throughout the night, I'm going to show you a picture here in a second, but throughout the night, you cycle through these light, then deep, then REM. And the earlier you are in the night, the more time you're going to spend in deep sleep. And then as the night progresses, you're going to spend more and more time in REM sleep. So that's why a lot of times if you wake up and you kind of remember your dreams, it was more closer to the time that you woke up rather than like right when you fell asleep. The average person wakes up blank times a night. I just always thought this was a really interesting fact. Because of wearables, because of Fitbits, because of Oura Rings, because of Apple Watches, the tech companies now have billions, if not trillions, of hours of data. So in the last 10 or 20 years, we've learned more about sleep than we have all of eternity before that. So really crazy, but the number that I heard from this was 9. The average person wakes up 9 times a night, and that doesn't impact your overall sleep. What impacts it is how quickly you fall back asleep. So somebody could wake up 4 times, somebody else could wake up 14 times, and they might still get the same amount of restorative, good quality sleep. So, you do want to be a restful sleeper. You don't want to be awake all the time. But 9 times a night is the average, and I just always thought that was crazy. The other thing, since we're kind of flying through this today and really getting to these strategies, I want to just give some ammo so that you can go and Google this. A lot of this comes from my own research of hours and hours of reading books and podcasts and studying and self hacking on myself in my Oura Ring and my metrics and stuff. But here are some things that you can Google. And I actually meant to proofread these. I don't know if I spelled them correctly, but Dr. Matt Walker, he's out of one of the California schools. I forget which one. I don't want to say because I might be wrong. Maybe UCSD. But he's a PhD researcher on sleep. So if you type his name into the podcast app, you'll hear some interviews with him. He's also got a great book called Why We Sleep. I've read several books on sleep, and that's probably the best one, Why We Sleep, by Dr. Matthew Walker. Ariana Huffington has her book about sleep. Sean Stevenson has his book. I don't think I spelled that right. I think it's SHAWN, and it may be PH and Stevenson. But these are some names that are out there in the sleep world. One of the things that you'll find is there's nobody saying anything different. Everyone's saying the same thing with sleep, that it's really, 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 really important, that it's associated with pretty much every health metric, every performance metric. And it's really something today that even professional athletes are starting to take really, really serious, because more so than their training and their practice, it's their rest and their recovery that they're starting to put more value in. So I've heard of professional athletes traveling with blackout curtains and doing some of these sleep strategies that we're going to talk about, and just valuing their rest and their recovery. Dr. Dan Party is another one of my favorites. Sleep researcher right now out of another one of the California schools. I want to say maybe USC for him. I could be wrong, but and he has a great podcast. It's called Human OS Radio, and each episode's about 30 minutes. But each episode, because he's a sleep researcher, everything kind of ties back to sleep. But he'll talk about nutrition, about performance, about metabolism, about circadian mechanisms, about these different things, and kind of tie them back into sleep. And then the Oura Ring, we're going to talk about the Oura Ring in detail, but you can look up the Oura Ring. The CEO of Oura Ring has a podcast interviews on high intensity health, on bulletproof radio. There's different things about this on Found My Fitness podcast, Rhonda Patrick's podcast, Dan Party's podcast, etc. So a lot of resources out there if this is something that you're into. But what does this look like throughout the course of a night? So throughout the course of a night, this is over the period of time of, let's say, 8 hours. So you see down here in the bottom are your deepest sleep. So we'll call it NREM 3 or non-REM 3. But that's your delta wave deep stage sleep. So you cycle through these and you go down, and you don't really spend any time in REM at first. You go right into these non-REM deeper sleep or lighter sleep, and then deeper sleep. You spend a little bit of time there, then you cycle out up into REM, then you go back down into the deep sleep, and then then you're about halfway through the night. Then you start spending less time down in the deep sleep stages and more time up in the REM sleep stages. So that's the natural progression over the course of the night. And before we get into some of these strategies, the number one thing that I would suggest is get an Oura Ring. It is an investment. It is not a cheap investment, but it's well worth it. It's one of my favorite things. Every single morning, the first thing I do when I wake up is turn my phone off airplane mode and turn my ring off airplane mode and get into my data and see how I slept. So it tracks my sleep stages, my heart rate variability, my body temperature, my activity, my calories burned and stuff. That's not the goal of it. Like a Fitbit, it's not an activity tracker, but it does do that. The goal is to track sleep and recovery. So it's a ring. Here's mine. The old ones used to be a lot more bulky. But so if you ever wonder, what, I'm not like a 2-ring guy. I just really love the Oura Ring. But the pulse pressure in your fingers is actually something like 200 times stronger than it is in your wrist. So the wrist or the ring is considerably more accurate than something like an Apple Watch or a Fitbit or a Garmin watch. So a lot of people will say, "Oh yeah, I have the watch, or I use the app on my phone where I set it next to me and it tells me how many times I move during the night," and that is not accurate. And the ring is not an EEG, okay? So it's not as accurate as getting a sleep study, as getting an EEG. It's not as accurate, but it is the next closest thing, and for convenience-wise, it's awesome. So every day it gives me a readiness score. So the readiness score is based on how well I slept the night before, how low my heart rate was, what my heart rate variability is. So heart rate variability is like if your heart rate is 60 beats per minute, that's not 1 beat per second. There's some variability. It's bump, 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 bump. And it's variable, and you want more variability. Heart rate variability is associated with longevity. Heart rate variability is associated with fitness. Heart rate variability is associated with stress, resilience. All these really, really good things that heart rate variability is associated with. Basically, you want more of it. And the Oura Ring every day gives me a number of where my heart rate variability was. And it's much more accurate than a watch, like I said. So here's a couple just examples of some of these things. This was actually this morning. Some of the other ones I cherry picked. But this was my sleep score last night. So I got an 87. Every day I get a score. And some days it'll be like, boy, I felt like I slept well, but my score is a 75. And some days it'll be a 93 or 94. I don't ever get like 98s, 99s. Maybe some people do. What they say with this too is, don't compare yourself to your friends. Compare yourself to just your own previous numbers. But last night, my efficiency was optimal. I'd say that sleep-wise, that's one of the things that I struggle with, is I usually have to lay in bed for 9.5 hours to get about 8 hours of sleep, because I toss and turn, and I'll talk about some of the strategies that I've done, just to even eliminate that. But last night, I was efficient. I had 87% efficiency. So every night I get a score. Here are a couple sample nights that you can see here of, this night. And you can kind of see like those, like that graph we just looked at. Earlier in the night down here, this darker color is deep. So as soon as I fell asleep, I went right into deep. And I spent most of my deep, I got earlier in the night. And then this light blue is my REM. And you can see that, from here prior, I'm not spending very much time in REM, and I'm spending quite a bit of time in deep. But from here on, the second half of the night, I'm not spending near as much time in deep, and I'm spending a lot more time in REM. So that night, I was asleep. It doesn't say on here, but I was awake for 57 minutes. Some of that was right when I fell asleep. Some of that was right when I woke up. I spent almost 2 hours in REM. I spent 4 hours in light sleep, which is pretty typical, and then I spent 1 hour and 28 in my deep sleep. Here's another night, really similar. Spent 1 hour and 8 minutes awake, but you can see I fell right asleep when I went to bed, and that actually will score you negatively if you fall right to sleep within 2 minutes. The scoring, the way the algorithms work, is it'll say you're too tired. So that's not a good thing to fall right asleep. There should be some latency before you fall asleep. But you can see this night I spent a lot more time awake during the middle of the night for whatever reason. I don't remember if it was a kid or if it was just I woke up. I don't even remember if I remember it. But I was awake through these times. But it's still, same thing, had more deep sleep earlier in the night, had more REM sleep later in the night, and similar breakdowns, but just slightly different. This night I spent more time in REM, 2 hours and 24 minutes. I spent more time in deep, 1 hour and 48 minutes, and I spent less time in my light sleep. So you can track the trends, you can chart this, there's all kinds of things you can do. I really, really love my Oura Ring, and it's something that I would encourage everybody to make the investment in because it can just help your sleep dramatically. And like I said with mine, I didn't know. I was going to bed at whatever 10 and waking up at 6 every day, and I had no idea that I was only getting 15 or 20 minutes of deep sleep each night. Once I knew, then I started some of these strategies. So what can you do? The first set of strategies, there's a few just different sets, and within each of these I give 6, 8, 10 suggestions. But the most important thing is going to be controlling your light exposure. And now with Oura Ring, the CEO of the company will say that they have billions of hours of data now, and the two things that they've shown make the biggest impact are wearing blue blocking glasses at night and changing the timing of your meals. So we'll talk about that one in a second. But controlling your light exposure. Controlling your light exposure is just so critically important. And I'll come back to this slide, but I want to explain this first. We all understand that it's light out during the day, it's dark at night. That's how our ancestors lived. That's how we were designed. That's how we evolved. That's how it's always been. But now we have bright lights through our devices, through our phones, through our TVs, through our tablets, through our LED lights. We have bright lights at night, and at the same time, we're underexposed to daytime sunlight. So we're underexposed to natural normal light during the day. We're under artificial lights all day, and then we have artificial lights all night. And this is what's called your circadian rhythms. And we're not going to get too detailed on this. I really could. I really love to. But your circadian rhythms are just so critically important. So that is step number one, to control your circadian rhythms and manipulate your light exposure. What they are now finding with circadian rhythms, the 2016 was autophagy. 2017 Nobel Prize was won for work done in circadian mechanisms. And what they're now finding is that circadian rhythms in your cells control over a third of your genes. Over a third of your genome is controlled by circadian mechanisms. Melatonin alone, the darkness hormone, melatonin, regulates over 500 genes. And what they're finding is that circadian disruption is a hallmark of cancer. It's a hallmark of metabolic disorders. It's a hallmark of these chronic diseases that everybody's suffering from today. So it goes beyond just good sleep. Circadian rhythms control all these things. Here's an article from Nature Medicine. The emerging link between cancer, metabolism, and circadian rhythms. And this is just one citation that I chose. There are just a massive outpouring of literature now on circadian rhythms, and so it's really, really important. So that's the first step to getting better sleep, is controlling your light exposure. So some of the things that you can do, you can wear blue blocking glasses at night. This is something that I do every night. I put on my blue blocking glasses when I get home. So I'm not anti-technology. I still watch TV at night. I'm still maybe on my phone at night. I'll just put on my blue blocking glasses like this. And what this does is it blocks the wavelengths of light that shut down melatonin production, which is specifically like the blue and white wavelengths, which even if you're not looking at, a white computer screen or something, they use blue and white lights to backlight the LED devices. So TV screens these days, computer screens these days, phones, iPads, they all have blue and white backlit. And that's just a lot of their color temperatures. There's a lot of blue and white wavelengths that shut down melatonin production. They've done some crazy studies with this where they took even kids and they shined a dim light through their closed eyelids, and it shut down their melatonin production through their closed eyelids. So wearing blue blocking glasses is a really easy step that people can take at night. You can install something on your phone. It's already installed if you have an iPhone or an Apple device. It's called Night Shift. So go into your settings in your display and you can turn Night Shift on. I'm not going to do a sample of it here, but when you turn night shift on, you can watch the color temperature change, and all of a sudden it gets more orange or more amber or more warm by turning night shift on. And you can have it programmed to turn on at 6 o'clock at night and turn off at 7 o'clock in the morning or whatever. There's also softwares on the computer that you can install, like Flux, and there's a couple others that just change the color temperature of what you're looking at. You can do things around your house, like we've done this before, install red or amber light bulbs. And you can look this up on Amazon. You can get these bulbs. And we have red lights throughout our house. We have amber bulbs in our kids' nurseries. When our kids were growing up, we had red lights and amber lights, and we still do that. We don't have bright white LED lights. We have more of these warmer tones through different light bulbs. Another one along those same lines is I purchased a headlamp from Amazon for like, $8. That's a red light headlamp. So when the babies were little and if I had to go in, I would wear that. Or if I'm laying in bed reading a book, I'll read with my red light headlamp rather than have a light or a night light shining on my book. I don't want anything that's going to shut down melatonin. So we're doing more reds and oranges around that time. You can install blackout curtains. You want to be sleeping in cave-like darkness, and you can install blackout curtains. You can cover up, your night light. You can cover up. I've heard of people traveling with electrical tape so they can cover up the light on at their hotel room on the coffee maker or on the outlet or something. That's pretty particular, but you want to cover up any of these lights, even flipping on a lamp, even looking over at your alarm clock in the middle of the night is going to affect your melatonin production. And you might not feel it that next morning, but over time these things add up. And so these strategies, same thing. One of them isn't going to be like, oh my gosh, tonight you're going to get a great night's sleep. But if you start doing these things consistently and regularly, they're going to add up in a powerful way. So you can install blackout curtains. Or did I say that one yet? You install blackout, cave-like darkness. That one's really important for us, for our kids. So our kids have like double curtains, blackout. It's really, really dark up there because we want them getting really good, deep, restorative sleep, especially as they're going through this time of life of learning and memory formation and things like that. We want them getting good sleep, so we don't let them do a night light. And we've done red lights before. We have the amber bulbs and things like that, but we have the blackout curtains to keep them asleep when the sun rises, and especially in the summer when we want them to go bed at 8:30 at night and it doesn't get dark out until 9:30. We'll pull those curtains. Another one is wearing a sleep mask. So that goes into controlling your light exposure. But I swear by mine. My wife laughs at me. She says if the house caught on fire, you'd run in and grab your sleep mask and then you'd run out the door. And that's probably true. Even today, I brought it here for this video. Like, man, I cannot leave this here. I will drive back up here in my pajamas if I leave it here because I love it. Now I've told patients before, if you want to try it out, tie a black sock around your face. It doesn't matter. You don't need anything fancy. But this one has magnets throughout it. And I don't know if the magnets help, but sleeping in a higher magnetic flux does help you get better deep sleep, and we're going to talk about that in a second. But I will sleep every single night with this eye mask. The first night that I ever slept with an eye mask, I had vivid dreams. I remembered them, and my sleep was noticeably different. And I have, since then, it's probably been 3 years, I probably haven't missed but maybe 5 nights without my mask. I bring it camping, I bring it on vacation, I bring it everywhere that I go. So that's some ways to control your light exposure. It's really, really important to fix this circadian mechanisms, not just for sleep, but for overall longevity. So that's step number 1 is control your light exposure. Step number 2 is control your environment. What are some things that you can do in your environment to make it more suitable for better sleep? Well, one of them is sleeping in a cold temperature. And you think about, once again, our ancestors, no matter where you're from, even in the desert, it's 110 in the day, it's freezing at night. And pretty much everywhere you're at, it's going to get colder at night. And that's something that our bodies are used to. So you can sleep in a colder temperature, you're gonna get better sleep. By lowering your thermostat, they make things called what is it called? I forget. Chili pads. That's what it is. And this is a pad that you lay on that courses water underneath you. It's like an electric blanket, but the opposite concept of it courses cold water underneath you and keeps your sleep environment nice and cold. A chili pad. You can sleep with a weighted blanket. This is something that I just started doing, and I absolutely love it. My wife hates it. She does not like the weighted blanket. She does not like the feeling. I absolutely love it. So sleeping with a weighted blanket, I've heard it's also miraculous for your kids too. You can sleep on a grounding pad where you're grounded or connected to the earth through grounding. We're not going to get into how and why that works, but it does, and it gets you a better night's sleep. You can sleep on a magnetic pad. We just touched on that a little bit, but you do get more deep sleep in a higher magnetic flux. And there's something called a magnetico sleep pad that you can get. They're not cheap, but that you can get those and sleep on those. The blackout curtains, we already talked about those. That's going to be it's your environment, it's your light exposure, but it's controlling your environment too. And so think about if you were alive, 1,000 years ago, and you're sleeping in a cave, or you had built a shelter. No matter what, you're never sleeping out under the open air. We've always built shelters. We've always had roofs. So I've had people ask that, like, well, our ancestors wasn't there moon and stars and stuff? And yeah, there was, but we always had a roof over our head, or we were in a cave, or we had a shelter or something. So we're always pretty dark in there. But you did have maybe flames. You maybe had fire. You maybe had candles. That's why some of the orange and red lights can actually be really great for encouraging you to go asleep. Some of the infrared deficiencies that we have. So blackout curtains, talked about that. You could sleep with earplugs. I don't do this, shockingly. I just haven't tried it. But I don't wake up to noises. But we get a lot of moms that say, oh my gosh, ever since I had kids, the littlest sound I'm going to wake up to because I'm nervous about my kids. So sleeping with earplugs is not a bad idea. Sleeping with an eye mask, we already said that. Controlling any sensory stimulation. And then sleeping with your mouth taped shut. That's a wild one, but I've certainly done it. And what is the brand? Shoot. I forget the brand name, but they make this mouth tape, and it's really, really cool. Gosh, I'll think of it. And Mike Mutzel talks about it a lot on High Intensity Health, but it's a mouth tape that has a little hole in the middle, so you can breathe a little bit through it. But what it does is encourages you to breathe through your nose, which is better for your sleep. It's better for your oral microbiome. It's better for a little bit of everything. There's lots of evidence behind not being a mouth breather. When it comes to your sleep, Mike Mutzel controversially posted a picture of his little daughter with her mouth taped, and a bunch of people went up in arms. But it's a great thing for your kids. Teach them how to be nose breathers. You don't want your kids to be obligate mouth breathers, so you can sleep with your mouth taped shut. Somnifix. Somnifix is the brand name there. A really, really interesting thing, mouth tape, but can help you get better sleep. And if that's your thing, that's your thing. I didn't put it in here, but sleep apnea is really, really, really common. And I do think that it's a little over-sensationalized, but I think there's other root causes of metabolic causes, of weight causes, but it's a real thing and it's a real issue. And if you have uncorrected sleep apnea, it will affect you metabolically and otherwise. So it is a really important thing to get fixed. But some of these lifestyle strategies, I think, are better root cause solutions. So control your environment for a better sleep. So what else do you need to do? You need to control your daily habits for better sleep also. So control your light exposure, control your environment, set up your environment for better sleep, and then control your daily habits. Obviously, eating well is important. You're going to sleep better with better nutrition, etc. But what can you do throughout the day that's going to set you up for better sleep at night? The first thing, the number one thing is get more daytime sunlight exposure. This is really important and is not talked about enough. We are under artificial lights all day, and that is not what our bodies are used to. And so when we go back to, the light exposure, and I'm going to go back up to this, if you look at, it's a little blurry, but you look at these times, and during certain times of the day, your testosterone's going to peak, and your cortisol's going to peak, and your thyroid hormones are going to peak, and your melatonin's going to peak. And these things go in this daily rhythm. Well, your light exposure is what sets those rhythms up. And it's not just the artificial light at night that is a problem. It's a lack of daily sunlight exposure. And they've measured this. You can measure this in what's called lux. And even on a cloudy day, overcast day, you're at something like 10,000 lux when you go outside. And even in a bright white kitchen, like an all-white kitchen, that might be like 400 to 500 lux. So you're not even a tenth of the, maybe like a 20th of the brightness when you're indoors, even in a bright room, compared to actually stepping outside even on a cloudy day. So you need both sides of the coin. You need to block these light frequencies at night, but during the day you need a full spectrum, and you need them at certain times. So this is called daylight anchoring. And you can do it any time of the day. You can do it, the more the merrier. But especially early in the morning is important. To see the sunrise would be a phenomenal thing every single day. To remind your body, hey, this is day, this is morning, this is when we need to start producing these hormones. And then on the same side, when the sun sets at night, then you put on your blue blockers, then you start dimming the lights, and you reset these rhythms hormonally. So getting more daytime sun exposure is really, really important. If you work inside, step outside for a break, eat your lunch outside, just gaze out of a window. Anything that you can do for this. I've had patients with, chronic fatigue that can barely get out of bed. And I'm like, hey, you need to crawl out to your back porch and watch the sunrise, and then crawl back in bed if you have to. But you got to get this in so that you reminds your body, hey, this is day. And if you're waking up every day at 11 or 12 and you can't sleep at night, and your rhythms are just off, so you need to reset those rhythms. And how can you do it? You can wake up and you can get this early morning light exposure especially, and then you can do the things that we've talked about at the night. But that's one daily habit. Another one is get daily exercise. That's really, really great for your sleep. Not right before bed, but getting daily exercise is just going to put your body into more of a state where it's ready for sleep and it needs more sleep. You can have a daily wind down routine. So your body starts getting used to this routine, or maybe at the end of the night you read a book, or you turn your devices off an hour before bed, or you have some kind of routine that you do with your kids or with your spouse, but have a daily routine every day. Maybe it's some of these things that we're talking about here. Maybe you take a warm bath. Maybe that bath has Epsom salts and lavender essential oil or CBD in it, in the bath soak. And you do some of these things, but it's a daily habit and a ritual. Maybe you do a nightly meditation. Maybe you meditate before bed every night to calm yourself, to get your body out of the fight or flight sympathetic nervous response and into the rest and digest and calming. And then you go into your dark room and you lay under your weighted blanket with your eye mask on, and you do all these things. But you can add these strategies together pretty easily. You could pick up 10 of these things that I'm talking about. I mentioned, maybe you meditate, maybe you do vagus nerve stimulation. We have this in another video of 6 ways to stimulate your vagus nerve, which is your relaxation nerve. So maybe it's a deep breathing ritual. Maybe it's a guided meditation. My wife and I used to do a guided meditation together at night, and we would joke because we said we've never heard the end. And it was like, this woman, I think, with this British voice, very calming and soothing, and she'd say, you're walking down a flight of stairs and blah blah blah, but we never made it to the end because it was so calming and soothing. So maybe it's a guided meditation. Maybe it's something like a binaural beats that changes your brain waves and gets you set for more of a slower wave brain waves and gets you calmed down and ready for sleep and induces more of a deeper sleep or slower wavelength in your brain, kind of like downshifting your brain. Maybe it's the warm bath, like we mentioned, and there's something to that. The temperature change matters, of going from the warm bath to all of a sudden to your cold bed. That temperature change calms things down and induces a deeper sleep. So a warm bath could be really good. And like I said, you can kill a couple birds with that. We're going to talk about it in a second, some other things you can do, but you could put Epsom salt, which is magnesium. You could put lavender essential oil. You could put other things in there. And then the last one that control your daily habits is to stop eating sooner. And really interesting one, but that's one of the things I mentioned that the Oura Ring people have found it makes a huge difference. So if you normally finish dinner at 7:30 and then you eat ice cream and then you have a glass of wine and then you do this, that matters. And the sooner that you stop eating, the better your deep sleep is. I'll tell you, this isn't on here, maybe it should have been. The number one thing that I have found that disrupts my sleep is alcohol consumption. And it won't change like my deep or my REM, it'll change my resting heart rate. And my heart rate will be 10 beats higher if I have, one glass of wine or one drink, or two, or whatever. But it does not take very much, and it disrupts me in a big, big way. I would have never thought that. So many people say, oh, I need this nightcap. It makes me feel so relaxed. And it might make you feel that way on the outside, like, oh, a drink. But it's not on the inside. It's actually making your sleep worse on the inside. That's why measuring and using something like an Oura Ring is so helpful, because it tells you what's actually going on, not what you hope is going on. But those are some things that you can do to control your daily habits. So those three things are the lifestyle steps. You control your light exposure, you control your environment, and you control your daily habits to set yourself up for better sleep. They're going to be my number one suggestions. The last one, though, is taking something for better sleep. Taking sleep aids, taking oils, taking things like that. My thing's off a little bit here. So melatonin is probably the most famous, but it's also probably the most controversial. Some people say it's really bad. Some people say it's not so bad at all. There's actually some really good research on melatonin. Melatonin's a powerful antioxidant. Melatonin has powerful anti-cancer properties, but melatonin is also a signaler. So by giving it to your body from the outside, you don't want to shut down your body's own endogenous production of melatonin and its own signaling. So it is a slippery slope. I do not know, and I don't think that anybody does, but there's a lot of opinions out there. I don't have a strong opinion on it either. I think that melatonin is occasionally good to reset your rhythms, like jet lag for sure, or if you just feel like your rhythms are off and you need to reset, then one night or occasionally like taking a melatonin a little bit earlier to just kind of phase shift your circadian rhythm sooner. But I do think that I would tread lightly with it, even though it's natural and etc. I'm not saying take it every single night by any means. I'm not saying take a lot of it. I'm not really saying anything about it. I'm just saying that I think that it's kind of a gray area, but I see where it has its usage, and I've had really good experience with taking melatonin at a really, really low dosage and just resetting my rhythms, but doing it occasionally and carefully. Magnesium, we mentioned Epsom salts or magnesium salts. Magnesium has a calming effect, so we have a ton of people who report great benefits from taking a magnesium, like a magnesium glycinate or something like that. Tart cherry juice, that's just one example of a food that can boost melatonin. Now, going back to what we just talked about, if you do tart cherry juice right before bed and you're spiking your blood sugar, that could have negative implications. And sometimes people wake up in the middle of the night because their blood sugar tanks, and sometimes we'll address that through other means. But tart cherry juice is one of the highest food contents of melatonin, and that can boost melatonin. And there is melatonin, natural melatonin in a lot of foods, so you can look up some of these foods and some of these things that you can take. Valerian root is an herb that helps with sleep. It's just one of the things that's common out there if you're looking for something to try. 5-HTP is a 5-hydroxytryptophan is the precursor to serotonin and then to melatonin. So tryptophan gets converted to 5-HTP, gets converted to serotonin, gets converted to melatonin. I don't recommend taking tryptophan personally because it can also go down the kynurenine pathway, which is neuroinflammatory, but 5-HTP is a little bit different. And it's something that you can try. Sometimes we'll use blends that have all these things, that have a little bit of melatonin, have valerian root, have a bunch of other herbs, have 5-HTP, have other things in them. And we've had great results with these blends. And what we'll have is people with sleep issues. And I'll say, hey, okay, we're going to start with this. We got to get your sleep under control, but we don't want to be on this long term. And after a month or after they run out of their first bottle, patients will tell me, you know what, I don't think I need that anymore. And so they're telling me that they don't need it. So sometimes we'll do it right at the beginning to just reset things, but we use different sleep blends for this. Lavender is also very famous. You can rub it on the soles of your kids' feet, an essential oil, really, really good. And then lastly, CBD oil, which is really, really awesome for sleep. The results that we hear from people are amazing, can really help with sleep. And I'll tell you a personal story. Recently, my dad tweaked his shoulder. And he said, I started taking CBD again. I kind of forgot about it because my shoulder had been doing so well. And he said, boy, my shoulder still hurts, but I was amazed at how well I slept. I kind of forgot at how much it helped me sleep. I need to pick up some more and I need to keep doing that. And so sometimes we'll have somebody come in for back pain or for anxiety, and then they just happen to notice as a side effect that they're sleeping a lot better from cannabidiol or full spectrum hemp extract. The technical name for it. So that's a lot of strategies. The lifestyle strategies are first, but really 4 categories of control your light exposure, control your environment, control your daily habits, and then when you need to, you could take something, but the goal is to avoid that as much as possible and focus on this from a lifestyle perspective. And there are lots of different things that you can try. So I hope everybody gives some of these a try and gives me a report as to how great they're sleeping now and how much better you're feeling.